Welcome once again to Musings by Danon. Today we're going to continue our series on Commander by discussing the Enchantress archetype and then building our own Enchantress deck. Before we get started, please like and subscribe. The Enchantress archetype takes its name from Verduran Enchantress, a card first printed in Alpha. 5 years later, in Urza's Saga, we got a second Enchantress, Argothian. Many people remember Urza's block as an artifact-themed block, but several good enchantments came out of that set, as well as one of the best enchantment synergy cards, Serra's Sanctum. In Magic, it is often said that whoever draws the most cards wins the game. In Commander, most content creators recommend you have around 10 pieces of card advantage. Not cantrips, but cards that gain you a net positive. There are a total of 7 cards that let you draw a card whenever you cast an enchantment, with one having the restriction of only triggering once per turn. 3 more that let you draw a card when an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, and 1 more that lets you draw a card when an enchantment you control goes to the graveyard. That adds up to 11, but to utilize all of them, the color identity of your commander must include green, white, and blue. If we remove blue and white, that leaves us with 5 Enchantress effects. A lot of Enchantress decks are either Selesnya or Bant, but I wanted to try something a little different. Jund. Fortunately, there are plenty of other card options to be found in those colors. In order for Enchantress to be useful, we need a bunch of enchantment spells in the deck. Otherwise, your Enchantresses become do-nothing creatures. I figure we need at least 25 enchantments in order to fully utilize the Enchantresses, but I'd prefer 30 or more. Before we go arbitrarily picking enchantments, we should settle on the strategy and goals of our deck, as well as the commander. Last year, we received the long-awaited Commander Legends set. There were a lot of new commanders from the set, and my family and I have already built a few new decks using those cards. For a while, I've wanted to build one based on Yurlok of Scorched Trash, and a couple of weeks ago, I was finally able to put it together. Today, I thought it would be fun to take you through my deck building process and build 2 versions of Yurlok, a budget version and a no-budget version. However, a lot of the key cards in this particular build of Yurlok are not exactly budget cards. You can save quite a bit of money by using tap duels instead of fetches and shocks, but overall Enchantress is a rather expensive archetype. Yurlok is interesting because he brings back a rule from the olden days of Magic: mana burn. Once upon a time, unspent mana leaving your mana pool caused you to lose life. The idea of a deck with Yurlok at the helm amused me, and I started thinking of ways I could take advantage of the card. I looked through what some other content creators had suggested and started building a spreadsheet. The first thing I do with any deck is figure out the core of the deck, then utilize a deck building checklist. The standard checklist looks something like this: 50 mana sources split between lands and ramp, usually 37 lands and 13 pieces of ramp, 10 pieces of card advantage, 8 to 10 spot removal, 2 flexible tutors, 2 to 3 board wipes, and 1 surprise I win card. With all this in your 100-card deck, the actual core of your deck is only about 25 cards, counting your commander. So what I usually do is build out the core of my deck, then add necessary pieces around it. There's no such thing as an auto-include when I'm building decks, except maybe Sol Ring, because I'm a big believer in synergy as opposed to best card theories. The core theme I was going for was mana-increasing effects along with X spells as finishers, so that I could have somewhere to dump all my mana. Yurlok's ability is for all players, not just opponents, so mana burn will also harm me as well. That means this deck will end up being a dual archetype deck: Enchantress and X spell tribal. So my first column is core, then X spells, then interaction. This includes both protecting my stuff, blowing up opponent stuff, and board wipes, card advantage, ramp, and lands. The core of our deck will be cards like Mana Flare, Heartbeat of Spring, Overabundance, and Nyxbloom Ancient. Sword of the Perunes and Umbral Mantle both generate a ton of mana for our opponents when attached to Yurlok, and I included a few other mana-adding effects. So how do we make sure our opponents take damage every turn? They could play around it and not tap their lands for 3 mana to cast a 1-mana spell, but I prefer forcing the issue through with cards like Citadel of Pain. Now let's take a look at X spells. With the exception of Banefire, each of these spells can kill all of our opponents outright, given enough mana. And with our mana increasing effects, it shouldn't be too hard to make 40 or so mana. But with the Warlock class at level 3, Unbound Flourishing, or Wound Reflection, you need even less mana to pull it off. Time to take a look at our interaction package. I'd like to include spot removal, stacks, and protection in a single category, because to me, they all accomplish very similar things. Getting rid of our opponent's troublesome cards while protecting our cards so they can get our opponents into trouble. For protection, we've got cards like Veil of Summer and Heroic Intervention. For stacks, we have Erebos, God of the Dead, Court of Ambition, Cindervines, and City of Solitude. Court of Ire serves as repeatable spot removal, while Assassin's Trophy, Abrupt Decay, Abrade, Chaos Warp, Terminate, Nature's Claim, and Krosan Grip all serve as spot removal. You'll note that I don't have any board wipes in the deck, but a lot of our X-Spell sorceries serve just fine as multi-target removal. If you feel you need more board wipes in your version, feel free to add some. Now let's take a look at card advantage. For flexible tutors, we're in black, so we've got the best two in the game. Vampiric Tutor and Demonic Tutor. Regrowth is somewhere between a tutor and a card advantage piece, because if any part of our combo gets destroyed, we can just get it back. Sylvan Library is insane, but you can easily kill yourself with it, so be careful. Phyrexian Arena is a classic enchantment, and while Rites of Flourishing may see more play in group hug decks, since we're trying to get our opponents to burn themselves out, I feel it has a place here as well. I'm also wanting to test out Valakut Exploration in more decks to see how it holds up against other similar cards. And of course, the 5 Enchantress cards. Enchantress's Presence, Verduran Enchantress, Eidolon of Blossoms, Setessan Champion, and Argothian Enchantress. For mana acceleration, I wanted to focus on enchantments above and beyond cards like Mana Flare and Heartbeat of Spring that we already have in the deck. So I added cards like Burgeoning, Mana Reflection, Dryad of the Elysian Grove, and Exploration. For artifacts, I felt that Crucible of Worlds, Soul Ring, and Arcane Signet were good enough, since we're already in green. Cultivate, Kodama's Reach, 3 Visits, Farseek, Sakura Tribe Elder, and Migration Path for fetching additional lands, and to round things off, I included a Deathrite Shaman. Running Deathrite Shaman alongside Crucible of Worlds may seem like a non-bow, but you rarely have both on board at the same time, and even if you do, one of your opponents usually has lands in their graveyard. For lands, we've got the usual suspects: Command Tower, some fetches, shocks, bond lands, check lands, and basics. Now that the deck is complete, let's compare it to the checklist. 50 mana sources, split between lands and ramp, usually 37 lands and 13 pieces of ramp. For mana sources, counting the core pieces of our deck, including our commander, we're at 62, which is a little high for most decks, but not for this one. For card advantage, if you include the Warlock class as well as Erebos, this is actually coming in a bit higher at 13. Spot removal, if we count our X spells, we're at 12. 2 flexible tutors, Vampiric and Demonic, the best in the game. For board wipes, we've actually got 5 with Torment of Hailfire, Jaya's Immolending Inferno, Walking Ballista, Fireball, and Crackle with Power. For our Surprise I Win card, we actually have 2, Sword of the Perunes and Umbral Mantle. Overall, I'm very happy with how this deck turned out. I got to play it one time before my wife took it over, and she enjoys it a lot as well. If you have your own build of Yurlok, I'd love to see it in the comments below. Thanks for tuning in. Once again, I'm Danon. Let me give a huge shout out to my editor Cute Stuff. I couldn't make these videos without her. If you'd like to hire her to edit your own videos, there's a link to her Fiverr page below. I'll be continuing this series for a while, going over different archetypes and my ways to build them. Please like and subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you all again next time.